What does an intake specialist at a law firm do? I've got the answer to that question and so much more on this episode of The Inside BS Show. Hi, I'm Dave Lorenzo, and I get your questions every day. You leave me questions down in the comments of these videos, and I really appreciate it. Today's question is, what does an intake specialist at a law firm do? Well, this role, intake specialist at a law firm, it's going to vary from law firm to law firm, but if you ask me what does an intake specialist at a law firm do, I can give you a really solid 5-step guide, and I'm going to give you the one thing an intake specialist should not do. In fact, it's illegal for this person to do this, and I'm going to share that with you today at the end of our time together. I've also got a free gift for you. If you're running a law firm, if you own a law firm or you're managing a law firm, you're going to want this free gift, so don't miss out. All right, let's dive right into the content. The first thing an intake specialist at a law firm does is capture client information. The intake specialist will often, when the client signs up, call the client and get all of the client's important information. So what does that mean? They get the name, they get the address, they get the next of kin, they get all the emergency contact information, and they also, the intake specialist will also collect all of the information necessary for the attorney to evaluate the case. If you're a trust and estates lawyer, this may mean bank statements and statements from investment accounts and property deeds. A very nuanced information. If you're in a bankruptcy practice, this is also an overwhelming job. The intake specialist in a bankruptcy practice has a checklist that's like 10 pages long of information they need to collect. That is critical to being able to properly represent the client. Now, when we talk about capturing client intake information or capturing client information and talk about what does an intake specialist at a law firm do, my revenue roadmap has a special place for intake specialists. In fact, let's talk about that right now. My revenue roadmap is a guide to business development for a law firm. It's a guide for a law firm marketing. It's essentially a law firm marketing plan. I want you to go down into the description. Right below where the description starts, you'll see some text that say free gift from Dave, and there's a colon below that is a link. It's revenueroadmapguide.com is the website. I want you to go to that website, input your contact information. You're going to download my revenue roadmap. Why? Well, a law firm intake specialist handles step number 7 in the revenue roadmap, and that's onboarding. And what that means is they capture all the client information, do a thorough interview to understand exactly what's going on in the client's world. The intake specialist should be a sharp-eyed, consultative person who can identify more than just the issue the client has brought to the firm. In fact, when the intake specialist is doing the onboarding, they should be asking questions to understand how else the law firm can help the client. Step number 2, or point number 2 in what does an intake specialist at a law firm do? They help the client understand the case. Picture the intake specialist at the law firm and envision them as a translator for the client. So when the attorney says they're going to send out a demand letter, the intake specialist will call the client and say, the attorney has just told me they're sending out a letter asking for X amount from the party that you're suing. The intake specialist is the translator for the client. They help the client understand the case, and they help the client understand what the attorney is doing at what point on the case. The third thing, number 3, the third thing an intake specialist at a law firm does is the intake specialist answers questions and facilitates communication. So the intake specialist will onboard the client, and then they'll help to translate the legalese to the client, and then they are available as a point of contact, as a person to answer questions and set up appointments with the attorneys. In the law firms that I work with, the intake specialist is the last line of defense if the client can't get a hold of anyone. So when the attorney is assigned to the matter, sometimes it'll be an attorney and a paralegal, sometimes it'll be multiple attorneys assigned to a client. The attorneys get busy and they may not be able to answer the client in a timely fashion. That's where the intake specialist comes in. The intake specialist will often tell the client, or a good intake specialist will tell the client, listen, if you call the attorney and he doesn't call you back because he's really busy and he's in court, you can always reach out to me. I will get you an answer to any question that you have, and I'll make sure the attorney returns your call in a timely fashion. So the intake specialist really is a client advocate within the firm to facilitate communication and answer questions. The fourth thing an intake specialist does is they obtain all necessary documentation and they maintain the file. They keep copies and maintain copies in the file. Now, this is all electronic these days. Most law firms don't have paper copies anymore. The intake specialist will input and upload all of the information, and then as the attorney is putting information into the record, the intake specialist will make sure that that information is incorporated into the client's file and make sure that the client has access to that information. So in addition to doing intake, the intake specialist also serves as the guardian of the files to make sure that everything is in order. The fifth and final step that an intake specialist does, and before I tell you this, don't forget, I'm going to tell you at the end of our time together what an intake specialist should never do. Don't miss this. Stick with me to the end of this video. The fifth thing that an intake specialist does is prepare all initial paperwork. So the intake specialist will set up the file for the attorney. They'll open the new matter for the attorney in a lot of firms. They'll get the matter number. They'll make sure the billing goes out to the client, and then they will turn everything over to the attorney. All right, let's talk about what an intake specialist should never do. In fact, it's illegal for them to do this. In some law firms, personal injury firms in particular, a runner is called an intake specialist. A runner is someone who literally chases ambulances. The runner, that's where ambulance chasers get their name, the runner will go to the hospital, find patients who are injured, and sign them up to get the law firm to represent them. In most states, this is illegal, and in most states, they call this person, in most shady law firms, they call this person an intake specialist, but they're not. They're an illegal runner who's out soliciting business. So, if you own a law firm or if you manage a law firm, you should never do this. You should never have an intake specialist who's really a runner, who serves to go to hospitals and sign up injured people to make them your clients. There are legitimate ways, really good ways to attract clients. Look through my Revenue Roadmap guide. You can get a copy in the description of this video. That will teach you the right way to get clients. An intake specialist does everything I've outlined. They don't run to the hospital and chase down cases. My name is Dave Lorenzo. I'm here every day with great new business strategy for you. Some days we cover strategy specific to professional services firms. Today we're talking about an intake specialist. You asked me the question, what does an intake specialist do? And I answered it for you. I'll have another one of these videos for you tomorrow. I'll see you right back here. Until then, here's hoping you make a great living and live a great life.